Great. I've got it. Okay, our clock says 2 o'clock. Welcome to the July 28th, 2022 meeting of the School Performance and Accountability Committee of the Tennessee Public Charter School Commission. This meeting is being recorded and will be available after its conclusion via link on the Commission's website. As a reminder, please make sure that your microphone light is on before speaking. Okay, before we begin our business today, Chase, can you take a roll call of the commissioners, please?
Commissioner Sisnet. Commissioner Griscom.
Here.
Is present. Chairman Richards.
Here.
Is present. Chairman Richards, you have a quorum.
Thank you. The School Performance and Accountability Committee will consider several items on our agenda today. First, Maggie Lund and Beth Figueroa will provide the committee an update on the state, district, and school accountability systems and will review proposed revisions to the Commission's school performance framework. Next, Maggie and Beth will provide a presentation on Bluff City High School's interim review, including a proposal to place the school on probation for the upcoming school year. Our third item on the agenda will be an update on our new schools opening this school year, and Lawrence Walker and Melanie Harrell will then provide the committee with an update regarding school safety measures. Our last agenda item will be a review of the Commission's amendment petition policy from Ashley Thomas. Do any commissioners have questions or comments on this agenda before we vote to approve it?
I'll move its approval.
I'll second. All in favor say aye. Aye. Any opposed? Nope. Okay. All right. Next thing, we need to look at the minutes from the committee meetings held on March 31st, 2022 and June 23rd, 2022, which have been previously provided, and we've had an opportunity to review them. Does anyone have any edits or comments to make regarding the prior minutes before we proceed?
I move their approval.
Second? All right, those in favor, please say aye. Aye. Any opposed? Nope. Okay. We're good. All right, moving on. Beth Figueroa and Maggie Lund will be presenting the first several items for the committee today. I would like to recognize them to present the school district accountability and the Commission's school performance framework revisions. You are recognized, ladies.
Thank you, Commissioner Richards. Today we will be discussing some district accountability updates along with a refresh of our school performance framework. This year, each district will receive one of the following ratings from the TDOE. In addition, the TDOE will also assign letter grades to all schools this fall. This is in alignment with the state accountability model. The letter grade calculation is a portion of our own framework as well. And this is to keep alignment with the state accountability model. The indicators and weights are seen here. As you can see, academic achievement holds most weight, followed by growth. Academic achievement is determined by performance on TCAP, and growth is TVOS. There are also indicators surrounding ELPA, which is testing and growth for English language learners, chronically out of school or chronic absenteeism, and for high schoolers, it includes graduation rate and a ready graduate indicator. Again, this letter grade calculation encompasses all of these items, and it also is a portion of the Commission's framework known as student outcomes. We will now discuss the proposed revisions to the Commission's school performance framework. Last February, we began the process of working to refresh our school performance framework. It was an ideal time to do so as the Commission assumed oversight of previous state boards-run schools along with the Commission portfolio rapidly expanding. NACSA also announced that they would be refreshing their framework, so in the interest of ensuring that we reflect current best practices, we chose to do the same. We contracted with SchoolWorks to help develop our process and act as a consultant throughout. And our process began with phase 1, which was collecting information and input from a variety of stakeholder groups. We then began drafting and refining materials for a refreshed framework, and we are now in front of you today presenting this framework for first read tomorrow. Next steps will be to refine and make any changes as a result of our discussion today, and then we will pressure test this framework and run our school's data through it once that data is fully available at the end of August. Finally, we will present this framework for final read in October. The process included information gathering sessions from numerous stakeholders, including the ones you see here on the screen. A special shout out to Commissioner Sisnet for his collaboration in this process. These stakeholders were engaged earlier this spring to garner their perspectives and feedback during the information gathering session, and we have continued to engage school operators in this refresh process through individual meetings and quarterly stakeholder meetings as we began drafting our materials. We are thankful for this collaboration and will continually involve our school operators as we pressure test this framework this summer. We are committed to continuous improvement and making sure we always are improving our work. We also want to reiterate, though, that upon final reading in October, this is a document that we want to have consistency over time with and not have to update annually. Today, we have provided you a few different materials for reference for our discussion today. First, you have the SPF process document, which includes details of our overall process that we took to refresh the framework. We also have provided key stakeholders in that document and a high-level summary of the changes made. We also have provided a comprehensive feedback summary document that details the feedback we received throughout this process and where it is reflected within the framework. And it also includes explanations regarding the feedback and rationale. Finally, you have the outlined red line framework, and that is a line-by-line detail of changes and additions that have been made. I will now lead you through the proposed changes to the framework. So first, we'll take a look at the academic section. This is simply to provide information about the weights within each component of the framework. I will go into more detail on all these specific items as we go through the presentation. We are proposing that weights change in this section to reflect a variety of feedback that we've received in this process. One of the things that we've heard from school operators and a variety of stakeholders was the need to showcase growth in a more meaningful way in our framework that's outside of the letter grade calculation. Feedback was also received that there should be a way in this performance framework to capture things that fall outside of the realm of state testing data or TVOS data to showcase the strengths of a school that are in alignment to their unique missions. Here you can see the proposed weight for the academic section of the framework. First, we have the letter grade calculation, which is in alignment with the state accountability model titled Student Outcomes, and that's holding 40% of the weight. We also have a comparative performance section holding the same weight as we want to ensure the emphasis that our charter schools are providing a better option for students. The comparative performance is broken down into two distinct measurements of overall academic achievement in comparison to resident district and a subgroup comparative performance to the resident district as well. Finally, we have included a TVOS composite indicator to showcase growth at 10% of the framework and the addition of a mission-specific goal at 10% as well. I'll now go into a little more detail as to each of these components. So first, starting with student outcomes. This piece is reflective of the letter grade calculation in alignment with the state accountability model that I outlined earlier in the presentation. Throughout this process, we received feedback to reduce the letter grade calculation within the framework. The commission staff finds value in keeping the letter grade calculation as a significant part of the framework to ensure alignment with the TDOE and state accountability model. Also, with the rollout of TISA funding formula, alignment to the state is needed. And in addition, it would not be advantageous for a school to be performing quite well on our performance framework and not be performing the same at the state accountability model level. To ensure that we reflected this feedback, however, we have changed the weighting here from 50% to 40% and adjusted the nomenclature to student outcomes instead of academic achievement to ensure better clarity as to what is actually included within the letter grade calculation. Also, it's important to note that we've included academic thresholds for schools within their first year of operation within this category as well, as they will not have state testing data within their first year of operation. So we will adjust these thresholds as needed when we pressure test the framework with the current schools data this summer ahead of the October meeting. Mission-specific goal. So in response to requests to include internal benchmark assessment data within the framework and provide additional context and information for a school's unique mission, we have proposed the inclusion of a mission-specific goal. This goal must be aligned with the school's mission and will be negotiated and included within the charter agreement. These goals will be brought to commission staff for approval or negotiation and must be student outcomes driven and quantitative, meaning they must be viably measurable over time. Some metrics in alignment to mission-specific goals include items such as internal assessment data and benchmarks, nationally normed assessment data such as NWEA or MAP testing, and performance and curriculum rubrics. In our research of other frameworks, we found many other states include mission-specific goals within their frameworks as well. This goal will also add important context to schools that are new start schools and are planning to stagger opening year over year. This will also allow schools to track and report their internal data as they stagger their expansion and be able to showcase student growth and academic achievement. In addition, it provides a place to capture student data and untested grade levels, which is particularly helpful for elementary schools. Finally, it allows our schools who may have unique missions to showcase their progress towards achieving those missions. For example, an art school could showcase the way their students are achieving within that specific model, similar to a college prep school or STEM school. Again, each school will provide this goal to the commission and will have it reflected in their charter agreement, which means it cannot change without an amendment to the agreement to ensure consistency and measurement over time. Schools will report their progress towards this goal with aggregated aligned metrics, and failure to report this will automatically result in a school receiving a does not meet for that category. And this will hold 10% of the overall weight within the academic section of the framework. Comparative performance. We are also proposing some changes to comparative performance section of the academic framework. We received feedback that simply measuring against the resident district does not offer enough nuance for schools that are serving more unique populations that may not be as fully represented within the district as a whole. Many requests to examine comparisons such as nearest neighbor, similar demographics, or other Title I schools were floated during our information gathering sessions. The Commission's intent for this framework is to be long-withstanding and comparable over time. There is apprehension in basing comparisons on neighborhoods or demographics, as we know those criteria may change over time with changes to populations. Additionally, in more rural districts, there will be less schools for schools to compare to, which makes this calculation even more complicated. Ultimately, the Commission staff agrees that there should be more nuance reflected within this metric. Therefore, we have split the comparative piece between resident district as a whole and a subgroup comparison to resident district. School to resident district in the academic achievement across 4 major subjects will hold 20% of the comparative piece, and the other 20% will be a subgroup comparison of ELA and math between school and the resident district for students with disabilities, English language learners, economically disadvantaged students, and the BHN subgroup, which is Black, Hispanic, and Native American students. All achievement metrics need to fall within 5% of the resident district scores to meet standard. And finally, it's important to note that due to business rules regarding data suppression, any subgroup that falls below 30 students will need to be suppressed. And this data will be held harmless against the school, and the weight will be reallocated to the resident district section. The Commission will report percentages of students served within each subgroups through annual reporting to provide additional context to the metric. Additionally, to better reflect school growth within the framework, the Commission is proposing to add a TVOS composite indicator to the framework that will hold 10% of the academic section. As a reminder, the TVOS measurement shows student growth year over year, regardless of whether the student is proficient on state assessment. So in calculating a TVOS score, a student's performance is compared relative to the performance of his or her peers who have performed similarly on past assessments. So this is a true growth measurement versus achievement. We would like to pose this question for discussion as to which TVOS score could be considered as meeting standard within the Commission framework. Currently, the state uses a TVOS 3 as meeting standard, as that is outlined as annual typical student growth. Anything above a TVOS 3 is student growing at a rate that is higher than annual typical student growth. Our stakeholders are somewhat split on this idea. Some believe that it's important to have alignment with the state in terms of what the standard is. However, some stakeholders have indicated that we want to hold schools, particularly under the Commission, to a higher standard than what is considered the baseline. And those stakeholders would advocate for a TVOS 4 as meeting standard, which is shown on the slide here. I would like to get your input as a commission as to what you believe the appropriate indicators for meeting standard shall be for this TVOS composite score within the framework. So this is an opportunity for discussion here. I do want to note, too, that we do not have to have a firm decision on this at the conclusion of today. This is something that we can continuously run school data through as we do this summer and can follow up ahead of first reading in October, or final reading in October.
Commissioner Grissom, do you have a comment on this?
So as you were talking this with our operators, with our schools, and you said there was a split, can you share a little bit more about that?
Yeah, so, and this is all of our stakeholders that we talk to about this. So these are TDOE folks, these are people in other states that have similar indicators within their framework. Obviously, it's not TBOS, but a similar indicator. And then also school operators. And so when it comes to, and I know I can speak for some of our stakeholders believe that a framework should include stretch goals, right? That we want to have something that is a higher standard for our schools to be working towards meeting. But we also, see the other side where we want consistency across the board. And if the baseline is annual typical student growth of a TBOS 3, then we would want that same standard within our framework as a commission.
So as you've walked through this, it's been very, very clear of trying to make sure that we're looking in line with the state standard. So on this one, why would you want to be ahead of it? Why would you want to make it, is it the only one that's going to be an outlier?
In terms of, do you mean for like TVOS or academic achievement
I'm
or
talking
across the
about
entire framework?
Overall. So, I mean, as we've walked through this, what I've seen, we really are trying to make sure that we're in alignment with the state. This is one that sort of jumps a little bit. And
Yep.
so so why this one? And I'm not saying we shouldn't do it, but if we've really made a point, and having not been involved in these conversations, that we really want to make sure that when you look at our schools, our public charter schools, that they're in alignment with the state standards. Why would this be one that you might say we ought to be maybe a little bit higher on this one?
Sure. So when we think about our alignment with the school accountability model with the state, we do hold 40% of the framework in alignment with that. So this is 10% of the framework. An additional other 10% that we're also looking at is a mission-specific goal, right? And that's also outside of the accountability model with the state. And so that's also holding our schools to another standard of their unique mission. So with this piece, I think some of the rationale in terms of for stakeholders wanting this as a stretch goal would be in alignment to additional goals that we've provided within our framework, like a mission-specific goal that's outside of like the state accountability model. Similar to comparative performance, right? We want to fall within 5% of the resident district. We are holding our schools to a higher standard in that realm. Some stakeholders would argue that this is in alignment with some of the other pieces of the framework that are outside of the accountability model that we as a commission value in holding our schools accountable outside of like the letter grade calculation.
So Maggie, if we adopt this, our charter school is going to be at a different measure than charter schools that are part of other school systems in the state, correct?
Right. So their TVOS score under the state accountability model will still be, under that model. So as TVOS goes into their letter grade calculation for the 40%, they will be held at the state accountability model, which was a TVOS 3 for meeting standard. This is separate. This is us calling out growth within our formula for our framework as an additional 10%. So again, it's really, we would love to bring this for discussion as, do we think holding our schools accountable to a TVOS 3 as meeting standard, so then a 4 and 5 would then be exceeding standard, is acceptable versus having the baseline standard be above what the state standard is for meeting standard on TVOS.
So this is my last question on this one, but is this the one where you would like to make our standard a little bit higher? I mean, having hearing this and having seen through what you did, but is this the right one from your all's perspective, that if I'm going to have one that's higher, that this ought to be the one?
I would
And I'm
actually
not worried
love
about
to
the
open that up
10%,
to you all.
so.
Well, can I ask a question? Because I'm working off of a memory of times past.
Yeah.
But I recollect that TVOS 3 is sort of 1 year of growth for 1 year in the classroom.
Annual typical student growth. Mhm.
Okay. And TVOS 4 was like 1.5 years of growth for 1 year in the classroom, which is a pretty big jump. I mean, obviously could have schools that are 1.2 years of growth, which would be well above what the state standard is, but wouldn't meet standard under our standard, and that troubles me some.
Sure. I think that's a valid concern, and I think that's what we've heard on, some sides thinking that a TVOS 3 should be appropriate in meeting standard, because remember that a TVOS 4 or 5 is more than annual typical student growth. So, for instance, a second grader moving to third grade on grade level is annual typical student growth. What we would be looking at is a second grader moving to like third and a half grade as a TVOS 4.
And see, TVOS 5 is 2 years or more, if I remember right. I mean, these aren't little jumps. These are big jumps in performance standard that we're asking these schools to meet, which causes me a lot of concern. Yes, Ms. Commissioner Tucker?
I get to talk even though I'm not on your committee.
Yes,
It's your
yes,
lucky
ma'am.
day. I have a couple questions. So this is our rubric as an authorizer, right? Each authorizer develops their own rubric. So MNPS may not directly align with the state either. Shelby County Schools, ASD, all of them are there. So this is a different thing. It's just
Yes.
where we're trying to align. I just want to make sure I'm clear on that.
Absolutely. This is
Okay.
our rubric that we will hold our schools under the commission's portfolio to.
Okay. And then I'm going to just give a different perspective. If we are saying that our state needs these high-quality options for schools for our kids, and if many of the kids who enroll in our charter schools are, I'm thinking about some of these ASD schools, are really behind grade level, then I think that aiming for TVOS 4 for meeting the standard, recognizing it's 10% of the 100%, so you get a B instead of an A if you don't do this and you do everything else. In my experience as a parent of a kid with a disability, if you don't aim high, they don't aim high. And so I'm all for the higher standard, recognizing a year and a half growth is more than a year, but thinking kids in this state need it. They need more than that. So that's my 2 cents.
Commissioner Smith?
And like Commissioner Tucker, I'm not on Urals Committee, but, here's the only thing that, and I leaned over and mentioned this to Tess, the only thing as I look through this, and again, I agree with Commissioner Tucker. I want us striving for higher standards and everything, but what I feel is starting to happen is we're starting to shove all of our innovative schools into a one-way thinking in order to meet this, and we're starting to lose innovation. We're starting to lose their ability to think outside the box, do things outside the box, because they have to fit inside this one thing in order to meet our standards if they're not doing that. So that's the only thing, and again, it's something that we can talk about. I don't know if we want to encourage that a different way, where we're still saying this, but maybe we look at doing schools that come up with an innovative approach that they want to try, that we look at a possible reduction in their authorizer fee for the year to help encourage them to continue that incubation, something we can discuss. It's just, we don't need to lose innovation in the charter sector because it's what's helping move things forward.
I actually think that brings up a really good point, and that's something that we heard in other stakeholder sessions as well, is how do we capture unique missions? And so I think that was something that was kind of, and while not totally aligned, but I think something that we really thought through in adding the mission-specific goal to this proposal was to capture some of those more innovative models that don't fall into more traditional curriculums. And so what that would offer then would be, performance rubrics or something that they would submit as their metrics for that 10%. That would kind of give some nuance to schools that do have more unique missions that are outside of the typical traditional school.
Well, thank you. Knowing this is a discussion session, is there anything to think about that says 3 is where everybody else is, but add something if you can get to a 4, where it's an incentive to get to a 4? I don't know how you do it. I'm just saying, My concern is, and I'm all for us, and to Commissioner Tucker's point, really pushing to be more. Commissioner Smith made a great point too, so you'd hate to lose that. Somebody says, well, I've got this number I've got to hit. Is there any way as you look at this and kick it around between now and October to say if three is sort of the base and other charter schools that aren't part of us, that's what they have to hit. But we're going to figure out a way that we're encouraging them to hit a 4. And if so, there's some added something in this formula that helps them. I don't know. I just wanted to toss that something. to
Maybe
think
like
about.
an extra credit part towards the overall score. So if they hit 4, they get 12% towards meeting the goal instead of 10%. Yes, Commissioner Hanson, yeah.
Apologies for my fashionably late entrance. I wasn't even supposed to be here, so I'd like it to be counted as extra credit.
There we go.
In the framework, we'll allow it.
So 2 questions/comments.
He's wanting the 4.
I'd like the 4. How do we think about the average TVAS? So TVAS is across the state for typical, so I think one is our schools have more than typical flexibility to achieve different outcomes is just one broader comment. Second comment is, how do we think about the distribution of TVAS scores for charters in Tennessee versus kind of typical schools? And is that more towards a 4 or more towards a 3? Or is there any other data point we could have, you might not have this at your fingertips, from the schools that we're inheriting or from the ASD schools or just charters across Tennessee that would sort of say the distribution is right in line with a 3 as the bell? Or
Sure. So we've pulled 18-19 data, which is the most data we have at this point. And so what we've kind of pulled is 30% ranges fall within TVAS 1 and 5, and so the rest kind of fall in the middle. What we can provide for you all ahead of October reading, which I think would be probably the most meaningful data point, would be where our commission schools fall for TVAS currently. And that data will be available to us hopefully in August when we pressure test this framework, and we can follow up with that data for you all so you can see where our commission schools fall in terms of the TVAS indicator.
Yes, sir.
I just want to, I know it's going to sound like semantics. I want us to be very careful as a commission that we don't, that we are not just saying our schools versus their schools. It's all schools. And whether it be a charter school that ends up authorized by an LEA or ends up under the Charter Commission, they're all charter schools. We've got to get more to a collaboration movement in the state where it's not an acrimonious thing between the Charter Commission and the local LEAs, where they look at, hey, what are they doing and how could we bring this in to help further not only our traditional public schools, but the charter schools within our LEA to help move student advancement forward so that we're lifting a whole system up. So it's more just for us to be careful that it's not an our school, our school, that it's the students. So that's a little semantics, but something that we need to be very careful as we move forward, just that how our language and how we communicate this.
Yeah, you made a point, and then we talked about this in some of my private conversations, is that when we complete this framework, I would like this framework to be a framework that if we were talking to a a LEA who was starting up with charter schools for the first time and was looking for a framework that they should consider using, this would be one that would be good for use in any place in the state with a new charter operation under an existing LEA. So I think your point is well taken, and we need to think about it in that fashion. Other comments?
Can I make a comment?
Yeah.
Thank you, Madam Chair. So a couple of just comments and then a question related to the profile of the stakeholder feedback. One, I'm inclined to think along the lines of, given the student population that we serve, a higher expectation is really important. To the extent that our standard is a year's worth of growth is a year's worth of growth, given the profile of our students and the academic proficiency that they're currently at, that's not enough for them. And the supports that the talent decisions, the instructional supports, the special services, those are the things that are going to bump a student up in that process. And so I'm inclined to be less nervous about a higher expectation given the population of students that really needs a little higher expectation because I'm confident that they can meet that expectation with the right supports. And thing two, related to innovation, I think for sure, philosophically, innovation should drive everything. Different types of school. I love the mission component. I do actually think that really matches it. When I think about at the end of the day, what do we want to be true? The amount of learning that happens and progress that a student has is like the bullseye, right? And this is only 10%. We've already taken from a whole pie, we've taken it down to 10% of a measure. And to me, at the end of the day, what happened to a child over the course of a year? Did we catch them up? Was that a year's worth of growth? Did they need 2 years worth of growth to get them on track so they could be successful at the next phase of their academic learning and hopefully to get to a point of being prepared for life? And so I actually feel like I'm glad that you brought this to us because this is a point of tension, I'm sure, but I'm inclined to think the higher the expectation, especially for such a small percentage of the measure, is important. I guess to the chairman's question on the stakeholders, you mentioned that there was diverse feedback, but let's unpack that just a little bit. For the stakeholders, what was the profile of the stakeholders who gave the feedback? No, we want the 3, we're still there, versus the profile of the no, lean 4 for the standard. I'm particularly interested, like, what's Colorado's commission standard? Is it the same as the state? Is it a higher standard than a year's worth of growth under whatever measure they're using? I'm interested in some of the highest performers of our peers, what they're doing.
Sure. So this conversation regarding TVOS, because it is nuanced to the state of Tennessee, was not something that we had with other authorizers in specificity to growth standard, but that is something I can look into for you. We have access to their frameworks and can absolutely get you that information. In terms of, people who fell between like TVOS 4, TVOS 3 conversation, it really was a mix. I mean, we had people that were from the TDOE saying that they believed alignment was good. We also had people that said that they understood a stretch goal and they thought that that was a good idea. So, we've had operators fall into similar categories as well. And so I think it really just comes down to, as we think about this piece, right, and it's 10% of the framework, and I think you brought up a really good point about, and this is what we heard from particularly school operators as well, is where the rubber meets the road is student outcomes. And so we want to see our students performing at or better than the schools around them, because that is what showcases true innovation, and that's what showcases what we're doing what's best for kids. And so ultimately, when we get to that discussion, there were people who understood the need for a higher standard within this 10% piece of the framework. There were also people who understandably said, the minute we start going far and above, what happens when a school is meeting standard on a state framework, but they're not meeting standard on ours. And so I think that's where that tension comes into play with each, viewpoint, if that makes sense.
And this might be actually, to your point, I actually think it is an important tension because being out of alignment without, and is it a stretch or is it actually the standard? Because I love stretch goals. I'm not sure this will live like a stretch. It'll live like the accountability system that we implement on our schools. So that tension feels very real. So I'd love for Tess to comment a little bit about, okay, so let's imagine a world where our stretch is our standard. How does that come to life in your advice, your assessment, and what you would ultimately be recommending to the team here for authorization, for how we would implement supports if someone's not meeting this standard? Talk through that just
Sure. And I will say I have a live operator feedback for you all to consider. Yes, I told him, I was like, I hear you, and you're literally about to hear it. So this is one of our ASD operators, and his perspective is that if we're going with the state report card on accountability around the letter grade, and that for the letter grade, a TVOS 3 is meeting the standard, then why would we deviate on this topic? And I do think there is something to be said about, there is some statistical significance that plays into the TVOS and what your actual rating is. I am not a statistician, but you do see schools, because of confidence level, et cetera, moving very regularly on the TVOS growth measure year over year based on the confidence of, did those students meet expected growth? And so I do think when you look at the overall TVOS distribution, and I'm sure we will see this when we get the TVOS additionally, you see schools grouped in 1s, 3s, and 5s. There are fewer schools that are going to hit a TVOS 2 and a TVOS 4 because it's around confidence level. And so I liked the chairman's approach here of, do we say that meeting the standard is a 3, but is there a way for us to incentivize somehow, some way, and we can think about this and go back to our stakeholders, that if you're showing year over year TVOS 4 and 5, we are giving you extra something, right? I don't know what that is. We'll have to figure that out. But I will be frank, like, we're about to have a Bluff City conversation, and when you look at Bluff City, they have also had a TVOS 5 pretty regularly. And we need to think about that, right? So you have a school whose performance is very, very low, but because their students are also very, very low, they regularly get a TVOS 5. And what does that mean in the bigger picture, right? So I think we need to, so my recommendation right now is, based on this conversation, he said, well said, thank you, Bob. I think my recommendation right now would be, obviously, what's on first reading tomorrow will be the proposed meets the standard at a 4, but I think what I'm hearing from you all is there an opportunity to go back where a meets the standard is around a TVOS 3, but there is a way to incentivize or give extra credit, for lack of a better word right now, to a TVOS 4 and 5, and I think we will dig into the data when it's live in August and see where things shake out.
Yes, ma'am.
I'm having fun with this not my committee thing. This is a blast. I have a question for you, actually. I have a concern that I've shared with the staff already about the comparative, the prior slide. Do I save that for tomorrow, or do we do that today?
No, please go ahead. I have one. I want to go back there.
Okay.
So why don't
Okay.
you go first and I'll go second.
Okay, and I've shared this. The team was kind enough to give me some time to talk through some of this prior to today, so thank you guys. And so this isn't a shock at all. My concern, and it's not really, I don't know what we do about it, but this end count of 30 for these comparatives is a real problem. I think about, schools that are like early in their, life cycle and growing are not going to have 30 kids with disabilities, 30 students who are English language learners, et cetera. And so when we talked, I struggled with what to do about that, because my worry is if you just don't do that piece because they don't meet that, then that incentivizes schools to not have students with disabilities, English language learners, and that worries me, given some of the other conversations we've had about some of our schools. And so I'm wondering, I've beaten my brain around this, if there is something that could be done, I'm not smart enough to figure out what, where if they're not meeting that end count for this, there is it goes like a new arrow goes down to look at their percentage of students in those subgroups comparative to the district around them. And I don't know what you would, to see if it is an issue, to see if it's a situation where a school has, 100 kids, so they don't have 30 kids with disabilities, or if it's a situation where a school is not serving a proportionate population. Does that make sense?
Yes.
Okay.
So two things. First thing is that your point about looking at the percentage of subgroups served in comparison to the resident district is something we will be sharing out on annual reporting, the percentage of subgroups served for each of our schools. So that is something that will be available to you all in annual reporting. And the reason we do that is to provide context for this, because the 30 comes from business rule. And so we don't have a whole lot of flexibility because it is, privacy for student data. We don't have a lot of flexibility to actually change that number. And so one way that we are considering this to provide additional context would be to actually show within the annual reporting what the percentage of that subgroup served is for that school. And so while that's not perfect, we also, we went back and forth of, do we include a threshold for the percentage of subgroups served, which that is not fair, because it depends on, the environment and demographics served in the school, and a variety of other factors. And so that's why that lives within annual reporting and not necessarily within the actual performance framework as a threshold to be held to. But I understand, I know it's not perfect, but by the laws and rules that we need to follow for this, that's where we ended up with 30.
And like I said, I don't have any answers. I just have questions. But it does worry me that for accountability purposes, if I'm a bad actor, not saying that I'm not actually, but and I'm not doing well for my EL kids or my kids with disabilities, then it does me good to not enroll those kids, because then it doesn't count against me on this account. There's no accounting for how poorly that work is being done, right?
Yes, and one other thing that I will add is you're in alignment with something Commissioner Sisnet brought up to us as we were looking at, and we'll get to school culture indicators in just a second, and where those live within the organizational performance section. But something that he brought up as wanting to include as well was to look at student attrition by subgroup as well. So that's something that is built into the proposal for the organizational performance section as kind of like another piece to this, is to look at attrition by subgroup, as patterns over time, to ensure that there is no counseling out that's happening as a result of being held to a subgroup standard.
And I appreciate that. I still want to push us to figure out how to hold schools accountable for educating these subgroups well.
Commissioner Tucker asks the exact point that I was going to ask, which is this 30 number to me appears to create a situation. I understand the statistical and privacy reasons why it's in the rule, but it appears to create a situation where if you looked at this over a long period of time, we would not have any accountability indication for a significant number of our schools for these subgroups. So we've got to figure out another way so that we can have some kind of accountability for these subgroups. So we need to be thinking about that, and let's try to come up with something. Commissioner Tucker?
I believe you found that it was in our ESSER plan, right, the 30, because most states, 30 is a really high number, I asked. Most states are at like 10 for this subgroup stuff. I think we did the like super subgroup thing for 30, right, as a state. I think that's where we got to this 30. Somebody here knows more than me. So I'm not saying, it's in our ESSER plan. I guess I don't know, but.
And I will say, I know that we have concerns regarding, obviously service of special pops is something that is incredibly important to our commission. That is a very large lion's share of the organizational performance section, is oversight and monitoring for that as well. And that's, within the red line document, you can see, kind of the depth with which we are holding our schools accountable for that. So I also want to say, kind of re-note that too, is that this is not the only place where we are holding our schools accountable to special populations and subgroups. There is, quite a bit in the organizational performance section as well, particularly for students with disabilities, English language learners.
Yes, ma'am.
I just want to make sure commissioners know that just because the data is suppressed publicly, we know across subgroups performance from a district perspective, and the schools know. So we are able to, in our conversations with schools, have conversations about their performance across all subgroups. It's really a matter of, can we publicly disclose those, and are they publicly used as a part of accountability in the big A? But I do want you all to know that we have that data, we look at it, we have those conversations.
Yes, ma'am.
Do we have an early warning system if there's a big divergence between, to Wendy's point, I think, if it's skewing the big A accountability public process, do you all internally have a process like where there's going to be a flag of, we've got one story being told here in the full data picture, and then in the public picture it looks different?
Yes, I think our team looks at trends across schools, and I don't want to speak for Kelly and Reggie, but I think we can identify an outlier and determine, is that outlier something that we predicted, or is that something that we didn't predict and we have a bigger conversation to be had?
Well, I would just encourage us to take a hard look at this, because my theory on accountability, and I'm sure others have comparable and differing theories, is that if you are going to hold people to a standard, they need to know what that standard is. And with this written the way it is, it looks to me like there would be a high likelihood that someone, if we said you're not doing what you're supposed to be doing, they would say, look, I'm meeting the standard. You set the standard, I'm okay. So we've got to address this on the front end. I mean, I understand that you guys may know this and you may be able to talk about it, but when this comes down to a point of whether or not we think somebody's meeting their responsibilities under their charter, we've got to have standards and hold them accountable to those standards. So let's take a hard look at this and see if we can figure out something. And this may be one where if there are other organizations that are doing this a different way, we can learn from their, the way they're doing it. Because this wouldn't bother me near so much if the number was 10.
Absolutely.
Okay, we've taken you all completely out of your presentation.
It's okay. That's okay.
No.
That's
what-
great.
We
These
were
are good
hoping to have
questions.
discussion, yeah.
All right. Any other thoughts before we keep moving? Okay, perfect. Finally, for the academic section, we have made the decision to move school culture indicators to the organizational performance section of the framework. Most other states and authorizers, including NACSA, do not have school culture indicators represented within the academic section of the framework. Also, given the last few unprecedented years, it's difficult for us to make decisions regarding those indicators in the absence of good, reliable data. Therefore, the Commission proposes moving teacher retention to the organizational performance section under students and employees, with the threshold criteria remaining the same. The Commission also recommends suspension indicators being moved to the same section with more compliance level standard of meeting goals as outlined within the school improvement plan, which is developed in conjunction with our district team. Additionally, student attrition will also move to organizational performance section under education program. Here we have adjusted this indicator to be more sensitive to high mobility neighborhoods that experience more attrition by looking instead at overall student enrollment in relation to the charter agreement. Finally, feedback was received from Commission staff, commissioners, and school operators to have a section of this framework that would capture any counseling out of students, which we spoke about earlier, that may be happening. Therefore, we're adding an indicator to track student attrition by subgroup over time. This will be tracked through the school improvement plan, and patterns and concerns will be identified and raised to the governing board and school operators as needed.
Madam Chair.
Yes, sir.
So this BHN subgroup, that's the first time I've heard the Black, Hispanic, Native American subgroup used. I guess I'm curious, like Nashville, for example, has a very large Middle East, North Africa, MENA population. And I'm wondering if there's a specific reason why we're segmenting this minority population into a sub-segment. Any particular reason why we're omitting or excluding certain groups like that MENA group from that bucket?
Well, this I can speak for. Well, I know particularly with that subgroup that you're describing, they quantify ethnically and culturally as, well, within like checking boxes on forms as white. And so ultimately, when we're looking at historically underserved subgroups, this would fall Black, Hispanic, and Native American. And so that is a common subgroup that's used primarily in a lot of other frameworks as well across the nation, and is something that our school operators brought to our attention when we were discussing which subgroups, particularly within our framework, we wanted to quantify. So that was the rationale there.
Thank you for the clarification.
Yeah. Any other questions on that?
I just have one point. The student attrition in Memphis, Shelby County, we have an extremely high proportion of students whose families relocate within a school year.
Mm-hmm.
That is very different from a student who leaves the school because of performance or non-attendance that's not related to where they move. But in a lot of these instances, these children move to a location that is outside an area where they can be transported to the school, so they end up going to their neighborhood school as a result. Are we able to capture or differentiate for this? Because I know it's been a real problem in Memphis, Shelby County.
Mm-hmm. We've talked a lot about this internally with commission staff as to, what we can kind of boil this down to. I think realistically we can look at students who locate out of state, and that's something that we can adjust for. And then we can also adjust for students who we can look at and we monitor students who move from school to school within the same district. So we have eyes on those things, but within this particular indicator, it's looking at student attrition by subgroup. So if we notice a pattern in which large numbers of, for say, students with disabilities are exiting that program, that would trigger something that over time we would want to continue to look at.
Okay, thank you. Other comments or questions before we go on? Okay. Keep going.
Okay, keep going. I will now turn it over to Beth Figueroa to discuss the financial indicators of the framework.
Thank you, Maggie. I'm Beth Figueroa, and I'm here today to talk about the financial updates to the financial portion section of the school performance framework. And so as we went through this refresh process, we did determine that there were some adjustments that were necessary to the financial portion. In addition to bringing language into alignment with Governmental Accounting Standards Board's terminology, we also are proposing that in order to make a more holistic approach in assessing the school's performance, we would need to make some adjustments to some of the indicators. So prior to making these changes, staff did perform test calculations for all of commission-authorized charter schools. In addition to, we looked at some charter networks that we knew were having signs of fiscal distress, so that way we could have the confidence moving forward with these proposed changes. So the first change that commission staff is proposing will be to shift the sustainability measures within the financial performance section in order to effectively measure the long-term financial performance of our schools. And this will be done by taking into account the impact of long-term financial commitments that a lot of our schools are undertaking, such as construction of school sites, purchasing school facilities, as well as going out for bonds. This proposal includes replacing the current cash flow indicator and replacing it with an unrestricted net position indicator. This is because the cash flow indicator currently within the framework is unable to adjust for revenues that are accounted for using unearned revenue, timing issues that sometimes come up with payroll, as well as the capital projects that were previously mentioned. Furthermore, I would add that during our test calculations, we noted certain instances where schools did not meet the current standard for cash flow as a result of saving up money for many years in order to make a purchase or invest in the materials or services that were necessary to serve their students. So in short, the cash flow indicator is really dependent on the school's ability to increase their cash year over year. However, we know in many instances, sometimes you will make a large purchase, which would result in your cash going down, but that's not necessarily a bad thing. So the new unrestricted net position indicator focuses on the entire balance sheet and measures the level of the school's reserves instead of just looking at the single cash balance on the balance sheet. And this provides a more holistic approach to measuring the financial sustainability of our charter schools. I also want to just take a moment to mention that we have been talking with a lot of our schools transitioning from the ASD, as well as some other schools within our portfolio who are undertaking significant capital projects and constructing school facilities. And so during this process, we worked closely with them, and we offered running calculations using different scenarios to make sure that they were comfortable with these changes. Next, commission staff is proposing the addition of a total margin by school indicator. The current financial performance measures are based on the consolidated financial statements of a network, and so the addition of this measure allows commission staff to determine the financial stability of the individual schools within our portfolio, because those are the schools that we have the legal relationship with. And so it would be looking at the financial performance of the charter network at large, as well as the individual school within our portfolio. I will now pass it back to Maggie to wrap up the update for our framework.
All right. So the last section, and we've mentioned this kind of already, is the organizational performance section of the framework. Really, besides the school culture indicators that we've relocated to the organizational performance section, we've only made some small changes and updates along with adjustments to language that you will see reflected within the red line document. And if you have any questions about those specifically, I'm happy to answer them. But they're fairly minor language updates, barring the ones that we moved from academic section, which are school culture indicators, to that organizational performance section. In terms of next steps for this process, we are going to pressure test this framework with available school level data for all schools within the commission portfolio this summer. Commission staff will run school data through the new framework, and we will individually meet with each of our school operators to review their outcomes within that framework. Any shifts that we need to make to the framework will be noted, particularly thinking about the new areas of our framework that we have added along with those year one thresholds that I mentioned within student outcomes. Once we have that data readily available, we will take a close look at that as well to determine if any thresholds need to be adjusted. And then any additional edits warranted to the framework will come before the commission for final read in October. I will now pass it back to Beth for an update regarding annual reporting.
Thank you, Maggie. This is Beth Figueroa, and I will now talk about the Commission Annual Report. And so, as we've talked about today, we have our school performance framework, and many of you may be asking, okay, we have all of these metrics, we calculate all of these indicators, where does that go? How do we report that out? So all of the reporting out of schools' performance on our framework is done through our Commission Annual Report. And so we wanted to provide you with a little bit of a snapshot for what you can expect to receive as we close out this year. So annually, the Charter Commission will evaluate each of its authorized charter schools, and we will make the results of our evaluations accessible to the public. This report will include general information about each of our authorized schools and the results of their academic, financial, and organizational performance on our school performance framework, which is what Maggie presented to you today. The annual report must be published by January 1st of each year, and it's going to reflect the results of the prior academic year. So for example, the annual report that you will be provided on or before January 1st, 2023 will reflect the performance of our schools for the 2021-22 school year. Commission staff is in the process of designing. I'm excited about this design. I think it's going to be really exciting. We're in the process of designing the annual report, and it's really our intent that it not only reflects the performance of each of our schools, but it also provides a complete picture of our school. It tells the story of their performance. So this will be accomplished by incorporating infographics and illustrations that highlight our commission, our portfolio as a whole, while also breaking out our schools individually, and so that can be reflected as well. So as shown in this sneak peek, the annual report will provide a high-level overview for each school. Similarly, what we talked about earlier, making sure that we're reporting out where did they score on TVAS, what does their enrollment look like, what are the percentages of special population served. All of those items will be included on this annual report for each school. And then also each school will have an opportunity to write a message detailing or highlighting their successes from the previous school year. So thank you so much for your time, and I will hand it back to Chair Richards to facilitate the conversation. And Maggie and I are available for any questions.
Thank you both for those presentations. Are there additional questions or comments before the committee votes? I do want to recognize the hard work that the two of you have put into this process. This is a tremendous undertaking, and it probably sets a framework for us to succeed as an LEA going forward in working with the schools who will become a part of our work group. So thank you both so much. I know we still have a long way to go, but we will hopefully get there by October. I also want to recognize for the record the hard work of Commissioner Cisnet, who did a tremendous amount of work on this, particularly in the spring, and spent countless hours helping you and thinking about these things. So I just wanted everyone to know we appreciate his hard work. With that, I think what we're doing is we're not really approving this except to say that we're going to submit it to the full commission on first reading, which means that it is approved with all of the comments and questions and the open items as they exist, and we will continue to work on towards a resolution in October at the final reading. So with that, I guess I can make the motion to do just that.
And I'll second it.
Okay. All in favor say aye.
Aye.
Aye. No opposed? All right. Okay, our next item is a presentation regarding Bluff City High School's interim review. They are 5 years into their charter agreement, and this will provide the committee with key information about the school's performance. I'd like to recognize Maggie Lund and Beth Figueroa to give this presentation.
Hello, Maggie Lund again. I'm here to talk about the Bluff City Interim Review. So this year, Bluff entered its 5th year of its charter agreement, which is halfway through its 10-year term. Per Tennessee Code Annotated 49-13-121K, the authorizer shall conduct an interim review of the charter school ahead of its renewal in 5 years in alignment with the school performance framework. This interim review is intended to be a rigorous review of performance and the school's alignment to the performance goals stated within the charter agreement and within the performance framework. On December 1st, 2021, Bluff City submitted their interim report, which detailed their progress over the last 5 years and information about their goals for the next 5 years. Bluff City identified areas of strengths and areas of growth and plans to address these items. The commission staff then conducted an extended site visit that spanned 2 full days. We met with stakeholders including teachers, staff, students, families, school leaderships, network leadership, and the governing board chair. And this site visit took place in February. Commission staff then reviewed the previous annual performance reports for Bluff City, along with the data collected from the site visit within the site visit report and the interim report Bluff City submitted. Ultimately, the commission issued an interim report detailing the evaluation of the school, and this was shared with the commission's School Performance and Accountability Committee and the school's leadership and governing board on June 10th. All items deemed off track in this report warrant corrective action. So the findings for this report. Bluff City was off track for a few indicators within the academic section. For academic findings, you can see the results here on the slide. The only items that were deemed on track was the academic goal and projections for the next 5 years. Bluff City detailed ambitious goals for the next 5 years to address their academic outcomes, chronic absenteeism, and suspension rate within their report. And these goals were ambitious, but if achieved, would warrant Bluff City meeting standard within the Commission's school performance framework. Therefore, those projections themselves were on track. However, Bluff City's cumulative progress towards academic goals was off track, and that was pulled from previous performance reports, internal assessment data, and the site visit report. Bluff has not met standard in regards to the performance framework for academic achievement, and this year is also not trending to meet standard. And Bluff's chronic absenteeism is currently high at around 60% and has not met standard in the past. Their suspension rate also failed to meet standard in the past as well, though they are on track to meet standard for their suspension rate goal this year. Operationally, Bluff is on track on all categories except for enrollment trends and projections. Bluff has maintained decent teacher retention even despite some of the vacancies that they've had throughout the year. It's also clear that teacher retention trends changed as a result of the pandemic, and that we've taken into account and not held that against Bluff City. Bluff currently only has 3 teacher vacancies for the upcoming school year, and they have viable teachers in the pipeline to fill these positions. In terms of their enrollment, Bluff was under-enrolled last year at about 440 students total for the high school. Their projections for the 21-22 school year were at 590 students, so they were operating at about 150 students below their target. During our meeting last week to roll out their plan of correction, Bluff City reported that they have increased their enrollment to 537 students for the next school year. And they're working to reach out to every student ahead of this school year to ensure a warm welcome and prevent any chronically absent students. Additionally, Bluff City has secured a gymnasium, which they think will help recruit and retain students. That's something that they have wanted in the past that they were able to secure for this upcoming school year to help bolster their athletic program. Their financial findings were all on track for renewal in the next 5 years. So overall, commission staff believe that Bluff City High School is off track for renewal in 5 years. Due to the criteria mentioned, not meeting standard, commission staff is recommending that in accordance with our intervention policy 3.400, Bluff City be put on probationary status and a Tier 3 violation for continued failure to meet performance targets on the state accountability system and the school performance framework. This Tier 3 violation will result in a plan of correction issued by the commission and developed with the school. And this commission staff met with Bluff City leadership team last week to review the recommendation for probationary status and the creation of a plan of correction. All items that are deemed off track or severely off track will be included within the plan of correction. Key indicators of success will be identified, and Bluff City High School will share progress updates towards these indicators throughout the year to commission staff. This plan of correction will be developed and submitted to the commission staff on September 1st and will include improvement objectives as aforementioned, parties responsible, schedules, timelines, and indicators of success. So here are the areas of deficiency and improvement objectives that have been outlined with Bluff City leadership during our closeout meeting last week. These are actually directly pulled from the interim report that Bluff City submitted to us in terms of their improvement objectives. And they were outlined, again, in our meeting with school leadership last week. Commission staff will also set up bi-monthly meetings with Bluff leadership to track progress throughout this plan and will report progress to the commission during our quarterly meetings. I'll take any questions at this time.
Mr. Chairman?
Thank you, Madam Chairman.
You're the big chairman.
No, short chairman. So this is for 1 year, and you all be watching this. We have dealt with schools since we've been on this commission where they've been caught in a failure to perform, let me just put it that way, and concern about, is the school going to stay open, is it going to be closed, and all these mixed signals in the community, particularly with students and parents, and trying to figure out what do we do. So this is for 1 year. I hope they do improve, but what's next if they haven't?
So according to our policy, they are placed on probation for 1 year, and if they are able to meet improvement objectives, that would put them in greater chance of actually performing better within our school performance framework, which then at that time as a commission we could decide whether or not to keep them on probationary status or they will exit probationary status. So upon the completion of this plan and the 1 year time frame, that will be a commission decision as to whether or not they can move off of probationary status in their achievement of their improvement objectives as outlined within the plan.
So let's say in some of these measures, because they're significant, they improve on some of them they haven't. So we're able then, if you come back and say they've made progress here, to continue a plan that might then be focused on those particular items, correct?
Yes.
Okay, thank you.
I have a question. When you completed the review of the plan of correction with the school leaders, has this plan of correction been reviewed and signed off on by their board?
So the plan of correction is being developed by school leaders and then will be sent to us on September 1st. So in upholding school autonomy, it's really their plan that they need to execute in order to meet the improvement objectives. And so we met with them last week to kind of give them an overview of what was going to be discussed today in our commission meeting regarding their probationary status, and then giving them an outline as to what we expect as commission staff to be included within the plan of correction that they are then developing. And then they will be submitting to us on September 1st. All communication that they receive from us regarding this plan of correction and probationary status has not only been sent to school operators, but also their board chair.
Okay, because to me, I understand that we need to keep their independence and integrity from us, but what is important to my boss, what fascinates my boss is important to me. And the board of that school is responsible and hires their leadership and is overall responsible for their actions. And if there is some way in this process that we can get some indication that the board not only has seen copies of this, but is aware of the need for action, I think it would help their likelihood of success. My biggest concern with this is their chronic absenteeism. I mean, we've been through this, and this is not a new problem for them. So, and I know the COVID did not help that a bit, but that's, as long as they have the kind of absenteeism rates that they're running, I don't see how they can address some of these other issues. So if you'll pass that back to them. Yes, Commissioner.
Again, no, I'm not on your committee, but here's where this is a long-standing issue I've had, going back to my days in the General Assembly. When I look at this, increase composite ACT score by an average of 1.5 points annually until achieving an average of 21. How many years are they projecting it's going to be before they hit 21? And the reason I ask that is every year we let things go by, that's a whole other generation that is just being failed by the system. It's the same way that when people celebrated, we went from 30% reading proficiency in the state to 35. We're still failing an entire generation. So I know you can't wave a magic wand and you can't fix things overnight, but I'd really love to see a little bit more an aggressive approach from the school and how they're going to actually fix things for the students. Because every year we let things go by, that's more students that are not prepared for life that we're putting out into the community that we've left behind. So it's more of, this is more just towards the staff, the board at Bluff City, and everyone else that will be coming before us, whether you're looking to start one or not. We want high performing because at the end of the day, we're not dealing with widgets, but we're dealing with the lives of students who will one day either be productive members of our society or they will be dependent members of our society, and we want to make productive members of society. That's all I have to say.
Okay, other comments? Other comments or questions? All right, with that, I'd like to make a motion that we place Bluff City High School under a one-year probationary period and that this action be considered by the full commission tomorrow morning.
A second.
All right, all in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Okay, we'll take that up tomorrow morning.
Great, thank you.
Okay, our third agenda item is the school and pre-opening process updates from Maggie Lund and Beth Figueroa. You're recognized for the third item.
Thank you, Chair Richards. Hello again. I'm here to talk about pre-opening updates and school year 23-24 updates. The following schools are newly opened charter schools that will start in August of 2022. These schools are Cornerstone Prep School in Memphis and Rocket Ship Dream Community Prep in Nashville. For Cornerstone Prep School, their first year, they will serve kindergarten and they have a maximum enrollment of 75 students. The second school, Rocket Ship Dream Community Prep, is located in Nashville, serving K4, and their maximum enrollment is 450. Cornerstone Prep School is occupying a previously used school building in Memphis. We completed a walkthrough last week. Their facility renovations are complete, and they are ready to welcome teachers for PD and students in August. They are occupying a previously used school building. Picture is here. The building is adequate for their students' needs over the next couple years. The school was clean and had all supplies ready to go, and they passed their facilities walkthrough with commission staff. Cornerstone Prep School's enrollment is actually 30 students. That's an update that we received earlier this week, which is 4 more students than what I previously had on the slide. This is still below their 75 allotted maximum. Commission staff have had weekly touch points with operators to garner enrollment updates, and the operator has stated that the Network Capstone Education Group can support the school as needed within their first year of operation if they do not meet enrollment targets. Commission staff have also adjusted the BEP allocations in alignment with actual enrollment since it's different from the projections, and Cornerstone Prep School is fully staffed for the 22-23 school year. And they have a contingency plan should their enrollment not materialize to reallocate staff across other schools within their network. Rocket Ship Dream Community Prep. They are building a new facility in Antioch. They have hit some delays in their facility development timeline, and they have had to enact contingency plans for the start of school. Their facility walkthrough was originally scheduled for this week with commission staff. However, this has been pushed back to next week or the first week of August. Rocket Ship plans to delay the start of school by 1 day with a contingency plan of 5 days to accommodate the delays in construction. They have alerted families of this delay. They held a town hall meeting to answer any questions that families may have, and they're still offering childcare to families who may need it during this gap in opening. Commission staff have weekly touch points with rocket ship leadership on the facility, and this will continue through the next couple weeks until confirmed completion of the facility and the walkthrough is complete. And here's a picture of the facility. This was as of a couple weeks ago. Rocket ship enrollment is currently around 285 students, which is under their allotted maximum of 450. As I previously mentioned, we have scheduled weekly touch points with Rocket Ship to garner updates on their enrollment, facility, and staffing progress. Rocket Ship as a network can support the school as needed within their first year of operation if they do not meet the enrollment targets. Commission staff have also adjusted enrollment projections that will be used for BEP allocations to ensure alignment to their actual enrollment. And Rocket Ship is fully staffed for the 22-23 school year, and they have contingency plans given their facility constraints. Sure.
I just wanted the commission to note how important enrollment projections are and ability to fill them as a part of the application review. Because I think we're seeing it here right now. We have two schools that are both supported by networks, and so they are able to manage through enrollments that are coming in lower than what they included in their original applications. And so we feel very confident that financially they will remain stable. But I did want to just plug that this is why when we're reviewing applications and talking about budgets, that really determining can they support their enrollment projections is so critically important to the overall work of the commission. So just wanted to make that plug because we are talking real life examples here.
Madam Chair?
Yes, Commissioner Levine.
I'm not on the committee, so I just had to say that because everybody else did. No, I just wanted to say, just make a comment. We had an opportunity, it seems like years ago, but it wasn't that long ago, to go visit Rocket Ship, the existing facility, and I was really impressed. The engagement of the teachers with the students. I mean, we actually had the opportunity to go and observe them in the classroom, and I just wanted to put on the record how much I appreciated them opening their doors to us and how grateful I am for the work they're doing. And one of the things I asked, one of the school teachers there had been in other public schools and then now is working in this public charter school, and I asked her what the biggest difference was, and she said, for me the biggest difference, and without hesitating, she said the biggest difference here is data and how quickly we can act on student performance. And so these teachers were real believers in what they're doing there. So just wanted to say that.
Thank you. We also have 3 schools that have transitioned to the commission from the Achievement School District: Libertas School of Memphis, Cornerstone Prep Denver Campus, and Lester Prep. These schools are new to the portfolio and will begin fully operating under the commission in August of 2022. Commission staff oversight of this process included on-site walkthroughs last week for all schools, and we are excited to report that these schools are fully ready to complete their transition in August. As an update for the school year 22-23, we will serve the schools that you see here on the screen within our portfolio. There are 9 of them. We are scaling. Looking ahead to school year 23-24. The commission has 2 schools that are already approved to open: KIPP Antioch Collegiate Prep High School and Rutherford Collegiate Prep. KIPP Antioch Collegiate Prep High School will serve grade 9 in year 1, and they have students within a current 8th grade cohort that will matriculate to the high school. They have identified a temporary location while they work through the permanent location purchase and renovation. Rutherford Collegiate Prep is approved to serve grades K-5 in year 1. In accordance with Tennessee Code Annotated 49-13-110, they have opted to delay a year to open in 23-24. Rethink and NEI are looking for a suitable facility option that will support the school in the short and long term in the northwest region of Rutherford County. NEI and Rethink Forward are providing regular updates to commission staff on progress toward identifying a facility and hiring school leadership. All right, I'll take any questions at this time.
Are there any questions? All right. Thank you so much for this update. We really appreciate the hard work and all of the visiting and guidance that you're providing to these schools as we expand our area of responsibility. All right, the final item on the agenda for today is a presentation from Ashley Thomas on the commission's, I'm sorry, I'm forgetting the most important thing to me. All right, we're now going to move forward onto a timely update about school security for commission schools. I'd like to recognize Lawrence Walker and Melanie Harrell to provide this update.
Hey, thank you.
And,
Lawrence Walker. So, in light of tragedies that have happened in schools around the country, thinking of the executive order issued by Governor Lee, and also at your request, Commissioner Richards, we wanted to examine the school safety measures and highlight some of the program. So I'm going to look 2 levels, the district overview, which will cover the emergency operations plan, policies, and procedures that we have in place. Also, the school emergency preparedness, which has their operations plan, the mandatory security assessment that they have to do every year, and other school level requirements and priorities. So at the district level, we have to submit an all-encompassing emergency operations plan in Navigate Prepared that is also looked at by the Department of Education, and components of that plan include designating first responder contacts in the building, staff members and responsibilities in case of emergency. It also considers historical events in the area, functional procedures, lines of succession, and cybersecurity. And as far as the policies and procedures, some highlights will come out of that at the school level, but we have the emergency preparedness and school safety drill procedures, the school safety policy, and the internet safety policy. Looking at the school's preparedness, schools also have to complete an all-encompassing plan and Navigate Prepared that is reported to us and also to the Department of Education. Essential components here include student and staff accountability for everyone, relocation contingencies in case of an evacuation, emergency routing and commands, functional procedures, and contact persons in and outside of the building, step-by-step situational responses, and cybersecurity. The next part for schools is their annual security assessment. This has to be completed by a school administrator and a local law enforcement officer, and they have to use the tool that is provided by the Tennessee Department of Safety and Homeland Security. These serve as a needs assessment, and the officer can provide specific recommendations to schools in terms of what needs to be done, if anything, to improve.
Yeah, I just wanted to clarify as a part of that, is that done with the law enforcement officer going to the facility?
Yes,
Okay.
they're on the facility doing a walkthrough.
Okay.
School level requirements and priorities. These are pulled from the policies that we have, but 3 big ones are that safety must be included in the instructional programming and age appropriately delivered so that students know what to do in the event of emergencies. Staff are also regularly reminded of their responsibilities, not only to respond during emergencies, but to prevent and or report any potential hazards. And also the Safe Schools funding applications are tied to these priorities and to the assessment results. And the last thing for schools is their monthly reporting requirements. They are required to hold safety drills, log those drills, and report them monthly in accordance with our LEA procedures. And these drills could, these drills could be for anything from weather to intruders to medical emergencies or a number of other emergencies that could come up.
Is there a requirement that any deficiencies or improvements that are noted in the assessment process, that we go back behind it to make sure those things are addressed in short order? So if something's been identified as needs improvement, do we know that somebody goes back, in a month and makes sure it's gotten done?
Hold on 1 second.
Yeah, so I'm happy to help speak to that. I think something that I know Lawrence mentioned is that there's the Safe Schools grant that is allocated every year. To be perfectly honest, typically the amount of funding that is allocated for that is not going to be enough to identify what might be an identified deficiency or to support it. So we do go back and make sure that schools are following up, and when they are submitting their school safety grant applications, that they are aligning their priorities and their systems with what is identified, particularly in that security assessment. And there is an expectation that you would not see in these security assessments year over year the same types of findings, and that those are being addressed throughout the school year.
Okay, but does each operator have to have somebody designated to make sure they're checking behind to make sure this stuff's done? I mean, it's not okay for it to be a year later and it's still undone. I mean, some of these things, obviously the most immediate things, if the locks on the doors aren't working, that doesn't need, anything but to be addressed in short order.
Absolutely.
And how do we make sure that stuff's getting done?
So each school does have a school safety point of contact. Typically, in most schools, that's the director of operations. And so that's the person that we would typically be communicating about any of these deficiencies. That's also the person that is typically keeping up with us, submitting school drill logs, for example. I know, of course, we all think about things like armed intruder drills as part of school safety, but it's also, much more comprehensive about fire hazards or other measures that might need to be taken. So we do have monthly checkpoints with those people and ongoing conversations about if we're seeing any of these deficiencies sort of recur over time.
Okay. Weather's another big one.
Weather is another big one.
Probably the most likely problem that has to be prepared for. Are there other questions or comments? Okay, well, thank you so much. This is one I'll be asking you about again. It's kind of on my hot button list. Our final item on the agenda today is a presentation from Ashley Thomas on the Commission's amendment petition policy. We discussed this policy in March and provided feedback, and I'd like to recognize Ashley to walk us through the changes that the staff proposes for this policy with the committee.
Thank you, Chair Richards. So, as you stated, this policy was first presented at our meeting in April. What we did from that conversation was go back and we sort of adjusted the matrix, as you can see on the screen. We added language to show that this policy is a supplement to the requirements in the TDOE's application and the commission rule. We sort of realigned what the supporting documentation would require for the different types of amendments. You can kind of see that the contingency plan will be required for any amendment that comes before the commission, and then it sort of varies based on what the school would be requesting. We also put in their language that shows that schools have up to 7 days to provide that information when we request it. And then finally, it reserves the right for the commission to ask for additional information that may not be listed here. Hopefully this reflects our conversation as the commission remembers it, but I'm happy to take any questions.
Are there any questions or comments? This reflected my recollection of it. I read it in depth, and as I understand it, this is going to go before the Rules Committee later this afternoon, so
Absolutely.
we don't have a formal action.
Right.
Okay. Thank you. We appreciate the update and your hard work. All right. Well, I'd like to thank everyone for your attendance and participation at this meeting of the School Performance and Accountability Committee of the Tennessee Public Charter School Commission. At this time, I'd like to ask if there are any final comments. Okay, do we have a motion to adjourn?
So moved.
And I'll second. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
All right. The next meeting of the School Performance and Accountability Committee is scheduled for October 17th, 2022, and we are adjourned. Thank you all.
Commission reset live stream, take a little personal privilege, and then we are going to go into business operations.